Bryce Zabel is a Hollywood producer, filmmaker, author, and UFO researcher. In the past, Bryce served as a space reporter for multiple networks, including CNN. We'll talk with Bryce about the late Neil Armstrong and other astronauts who have voiced opinions about UFOs and extraterrestrial life. We'll also talk about space colonization, a new UK UFO petition, and other space and UFO news right now on Spacing Out. Greetings everyone and welcome to Spacing Out. I'm Jason McClellan.
And I'm Maureen Ellsbury.
Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I have a bit of bad news. I lied to you last week. Sorry guys, I told you that we would be talking with Steve Murillo from MUFON LA this week, but he'll be our guest next week. Bryce Zabel is our guest today and we'll talk with him later in the show, but first, it's time for UFO Headlines.
Well, this should come as no surprise, but that strange object most commonly referred to as the Baltic Sea UFO is making headlines yet again.
The object at the bottom of the Baltic Sea was detected on sonar in June 2011 by OceanX team. Based on these initial sonar images, the media and members of OceanX team fueled speculation that the object could be a crashed UFO resting on the seafloor. But the treasure hunting outfit set out on an expedition in June 2012 in hopes of identifying the object, and according to some sources, an identification has been made. But others, including OceanX team, believe the object's identity is still a mystery.
The website Life's Little Mysteries published a story by Natalie Wolkover on August 30th titled, "Mysterious Baltic Sea Object is a Glacial Deposit." Wolkover points out claims by the OceanX team that an expert has been unable to explain the mysterious object. After contacting that same witness, Wolkover alleges that neither this expert nor any of the other experts contacted about the Baltic Sea object think there is anything mysterious about it. She goes on to state, the expert analysis suggests that this is just a glacial deposit that the OceanX team discovered in a low-resolution sonar scan.
But OceanX team co-founders Dennis Asberg and Peter Lindbergh claim the only samples provided for analysis so far were collected in the vicinity. Samples have yet to be taken from the unidentified object itself. In their minds, the object's identification is still a mystery.
Another OceanX team expedition left Sweden on September 8th, and this is a follow-up to the disappointing outing in June that resulted in multiple equipment failures.
A date has been set for UK Home Secretary Theresa May to make her ruling on whether or not UFO hacker Gary McKinnon will be extradited to the United States.
The BBC reports that the extradition ruling will be made by October 16th. Back in July, Home Secretary May announced that she would delay her decision until October. McKinnon's mother, Janice Sharp, pleaded for compassion and asked for an earlier decision. But May declined the request because, as the Metro reported, she had an important role in the London 2012 Olympics. Sharp blasted May, stating that May could have made a decision before the Olympics. The evidence is there that Gary is unfit for trial and a considerable suicide risk. We need this decision. This delay is wrong, morally wrong.
Experts have concluded that McKinnon, who suffers from Asperger's syndrome, may take his own life if extradited to the U.S. McKinnon hacked into NASA and U.S. military computers in 2001 and 2002 in search of UFO evidence. If extradited and convicted, he could face up to 60 years in prison.
Many of you probably remember the several petitions submitted to the White House's We the People website asking for information to be released about UFOs and extraterrestrials. In fact, Steve Bassett of the Paradigm Research Group just launched his 5th petition on the site. Now this one's asking for the Obama administration to reinvestigate the alleged crash of an extraterrestrial craft near Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. But
it appears that petitions like this aren't unique to the United States. Simon Sharman, a filmmaker and broadcaster in the UK, has lodged a petition with the UK government requesting parliamentary debate on UFO disclosure in Britain. The wording of this petition is similar to previous We the People petitions in the US. It reads, "We the undersigned ask the British government to share with its citizens the full truth that it knows about UFOs and any visitation to Earth by beings or probes not from this planet." This is the only petition of its kind in the UK, and Sharman is going to actively attempt to engage the British population on the UFO subject by touring towns and cities all over the country during the next year, and he's going to give presentations on the subject free of charge. It seems to be a one-of-a-kind thing, this petition in the UK right now. And where this petition differs from the petition system that the White House has set up in the US is these petitions stay up for a period of about a year, and they're required to gain 100,000 signatures which seems to be an incredible feat. So I don't know what the chances are of that, but the gentleman who launched this petition is taking an active role in going out to the public. It's like campaigning, basically, going out and giving presentations on UFOs. He's researched UFOs for, I believe, 20 years now. And he's trying to educate the public on the topic and trying to get the interest so they will sign this petition to try to get more information out.
I mean, I think that's the only really interesting thing about this one, because honestly, in my opinion, I don't think any of these petitions are going to do any good. Even if they get past the signatures, you're not going to get the answer you want. I mean, that's pretty point blank, and we've seen that with the past petitions.
Well, the UK has, periodically released files related to UFOs and their investigation into UFOs. We may have the individual on the show to talk to us about why he decided to launch this petition and what he sees it accomplishing. Maureen, I am not surprised to see the Baltic Sea UFO back in the news.
No, not at all. I mean, I've been getting questions from a lot of people about this and what's the updates, what's going on. And after their last June briefing, they kind of disappeared for a while. Now they're back off again and supposedly going to be able to bring a lot of new tools out there to try to get some samples of the actual structure, because, like they said, they apparently haven't taken samples from the alleged object.
It is interesting, though. There is something there. They haven't really been able to image it as well as, all of us curious people would like. And more testing would be good, and actual samples from the object itself. I think some skeptics are too quick to jump to conclusions without all of the evidence that we could possibly have. Life's Little Mysteries has published numerous stories, jumping the gun, I think, on a few different conclusions.
Well, and now they're saying, too, that there's a lot more things on the actual anomaly, like stairs and things like that they think are in there. But I don't know. I'm very skeptical, too, about all of this. We'll just find out what happens, I guess. I mean, at least we're going to finally hear the McKinnon ruling, and maybe it'll be done with soon. Yeah,
good luck to the guy. He drags on and on and on. He's lost so much of his life, 10-plus years. His mom keeps fighting for him. And it's interesting that the U.S. keeps pushing this so hard for extradition. And they're a little hypocritical themselves, I think. They are currently denying other countries extradition rights, but we keep pushing Gary for this little computer hack. They claim it did so many thousands of dollars of damage to the systems and everything.
I don't know if they're trying to make an example out of him or what, but
right.
Oh well, we'll find out soon.
Find out in October. In space news this week, Lord Martin Rees, former president of the Royal Society, believes that extraterrestrial life could be found within 40 years. Rees commented on extraterrestrial life during an event to launch theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking's television series, Stephen Hawking's Grand Design, on the Discovery Channel in the UK.
Lord Rees was asked about the expected changes in science during the next 40 years. According to the Daily Mail, Rees responded that finding out more about the origin of life, the place where it exists, and whether aliens exist is going to be crucial over the next 4 decades. He also explained his opinion that within 10 or 20 years, we will be able to image other planets like Earth orbiting other stars.
And Rees thinks this will be a really exciting subject to see if there's evidence for extraterrestrial life or not. The Daily Mail also points out that Rees stated that there may be some scientific challenges that are beyond human brains and that we may even need alien interaction to help us learn more. The Telegraph explains that Lord Rees has been Astronomer Royal, or Royale if you prefer, a senior position within the royal household, offering advice to the Queen on astronomical matters since 1995.
According to a Discovery Channel press release, Stephen Hawking's Grand Design is a profound, beautiful, and exciting story that will reveal the ultimate theory of physics, challenging the way you think about the cosmos forever. Although this series already aired in the U.S. earlier this year, the show just premiered Thursday, September 13th on Discovery UK.
A new scientific model for understanding habitable environments on other planets was recently presented at the British Science Festival in Aberdeen. Phys.org explains that an extraterrestrial environment is considered habitable if it is suitable for life as we know it. And as Sean McMahon from University of Aberdeen School of Geosciences explains, life as we know it requires water.
Previous models for considering habitability have only considered surface environments, but the new model presented on Friday, September 7th, expands environments in which scientists may find life to include subsurface environments.
Scientists base their assumption about life elsewhere in the universe on Earth-based life. But as McMahon points out, we now know that many microorganisms, perhaps half of all living things on Earth, reside deep in the rocky crust of the planet, not on the surface. So it only seems natural to include subterranean environments when considering the potential habitability of an alien world.
The new habitability model developed by University of Aberdeen scientists takes into account a planet's potential for underground water and therefore life. Based on this model, the team says habitable planets could be much more widespread than previously thought.
Technology known as contour crafting could provide an economically viable and reliable building system for construction in space. This technology uses 3D printing to build cement buildings at a relatively fast pace. The Washington Post explains that this technology was developed by revamping a construction system pioneered by Beirut Kushnevis 10 years ago.
Kushnevis, a professor and director of the University of Southern California's Manufacturing Engineering Graduate Program, was awarded a $500,000 grant from NASA's Innovative Advanced Concepts Division to develop automated building technology that will allow scientists to build structures on planets and moons. The Washington Post points out that earlier lunar construction proposals were based on taking materials to the moon for assembly. But Kushnevis contour crafting offers a significantly less costly solution. He states, use the material that's there and then use robotic systems that will take energy from the sun to operate instead.
Kushnevis' system brings space construction closer to reality, but it is reportedly still decades away from being utilized to actually construct buildings on the moon.
So one of our favorite topics is colonizing different planets, obviously.
Yes.
We talk about Mars a lot, with Mars 1 and, Elon Musk trying to get colonists up there by 2023. But now we're talking about the moon a little bit. And in a different sense of we're going to speed up making habitats on there with the materials that are currently on the moon with a cool 3D printer.
And permanent structures. This is interesting, using a 3D printer to build buildings. And these are permanent structures. You have the company Mars 1 that we talked about that has their little modules that are going to shoot up there and assemble a colony. Yeah. But with this 3D printing idea, you're actually building buildings on the moon with resources that are on the moon.
It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy, but the technology is more or less there. It exists. And just last year, at the end of last year, I think, they released a lot of their back issues of their journals, the Royal Society journals, going back to the 50s. And there are so many scientific papers talking about extraterrestrial life. And the Royal Society, it's this group of really the most famous scientists and the people who belong. Stephen Hawking belonged to the Royal Society, but Sir Isaac Newton belonged to the Royal Society, Albert Einstein, Charles Darwin. So, some of the greatest scientific minds that we view as great scientific minds belong to the Royal Society, and extraterrestrial life is normally or regularly a topic of conversation.
And this is going on with the same thing we were discussing last week, in that sort of everyone's saying, well, either we believe aliens will be hostile or not. All these physicists coming to say it. It's the same thing. We've heard so many of these different physicists come out and say, we're going to discover alien life within 40 years or 20 years,
right,
or 30. And so it's the same thing again. So
again, varying opinions, and that's what they are, opinions, speculation. And as we said before, it's not consistent either, because not only are different scientists saying different things, but different people within the Royal Society are saying different things too.
Everyone's got their own opinions. So.
Yeah. So opinions, it's interesting, and the most interesting thing to me is just seeing that it is being discussed.
Well, it's really no surprise that this University of Aberdeen study has come out that to start looking for life underneath subsurface, environments. That's no big surprise, because like we talk about all the time, that water could exist underneath the surface of all these different planets and moons. We
keep finding out about so many planets and moons, like our own moon, like Mars, that do have evidence of these underground caves and big underground water lakes underground and things like that. So, with our limited view of where to look, based on life as we know it, looking for those water environments, this is a huge addition to that table of where to look.
The whole big point is life. We're searching for life as we know it, but there might be other, sort of structures of life's,
it's
existence.
most likely the case, but as scientists say, all we have to go on is what we know.
That's true.
So it's good to see that, even with that limited scope of what we know, it's good that they're including other areas. I mean, why would you exclude places with that already limited scope? So now we're looking underground, including that in potential habitability environments. That's fantastic.
We're going to have a lot of like mole-like blind creatures. Underground
creatures with creepy eyes.
Yeah.
Now let's talk with our guest today, Bryce Zabel. Well, Bryce, thanks so much for being on the show again. It's great to have you back.
My absolute pleasure.
Now, the first time we had you on the show, it was just you and me having a good conversation together. Maureen was out of town, I think, back then, so she didn't get to join us, but we're all three together now.
Up. Yeah, thank you. That's great.
I have no idea where I was.
Well, Bryce, the last time we had you on, we talked about mainly about your book, AD After Disclosure.
Sure.
And today I wanted to have you on the show because, well, mainly because recently the passing of Neil Armstrong brought some, well, UFOs and astronauts is a popular topic in the UFO crowd, and there are certainly stories related to Neil Armstrong and UFOs. And with a lot of these stories, there are difficulties substantiating some of the claims. But I wanted to have you on and talk with you a little bit about Neil Armstrong and other astronauts and some of the interesting UFO stories.
Well, listen, I hate to admit it, but I was actually alive and breathing and conscious when Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon. So that kind of dates me a little bit. But it was
how old are you?
Well, I'm not saying. You'll have to do. If you can't do the math, that's good by me. But I will say that the world was captivated by it. And I think they were captivated by Armstrong walking on the moon, not only because it was this incredible event that's only been repeated a few times and then abandoned, but also because of his essential decency. I mean, people really found this guy to be self-effacing, humble, and yet at the same time brave as all hell and so forth. I mean, he had things happen to him before he ever got to the Apollo 11 capsule where he could have been killed and might not have been the guy in that capsule. One of the great stories about Neil Armstrong is that he was flying some lander and he had to bail out at 100 feet in the air. And if he hadn't bailed out at 100 feet, he would have been killed instantly in the crash. It was a pretty spectacular crash. And what did he do? He got out, he went back to the office and did paperwork. And they asked him on 60 Minutes, well, why did you do that? He said, well, I didn't die. So, I mean, he's this very, calm guy. And so I think he is, it's the passing of a period. And I don't look forward to the point where we all say there aren't any people alive who walked on the moon anymore. Or that the only people who are alive are going to be Chinese. I mean, I don't look forward to that.
Well, speaking about the Apollo 11 mission,
sure.
There is a story that's made its rounds through, it appears in several UFO books.
Sure.
One was Timothy Good's book, Above Top Secret. I know he mentions it in there, but there's a story that supposedly comes from a former astronaut employee who says that there were people, amateur ham radio people with their own radios, intercepting transmissions from the lunar landing. And there's a story about what Neil Armstrong really said while he was there, hinting that he saw something of an extraterrestrial nature.
Well, you're talking about the story that's been told by a man named Otto Bender originally, and then was later amplified by another man who worked for NASA, and I can't pronounce his name, but it's Maurice Chatelain or something like that.
I'm glad you tried.
I did. I don't speak French, but I'll tell you that I'd like to read the quote to you because it's so provocative, and that's why it's lasted forever. Supposedly, Armstrong, when he got to the Sea of Tranquility, was overheard on one of the so-called secret channels or the off-channel channels saying, "These babies are huge, sir, enormous. Oh, God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out here lined up on the far side of the crater edge, and they're on the moon watching us." So you can understand why this has captivated the UFO crowd for as long as it's been out there. But I have a couple of problems with the story. First of all, it's not sourced very well. It's a third-person source. Otto Bender is quoting an unnamed ham radio operator. The thing is, there's no reason to have an unnamed ham radio operator. I mean, if this guy actually had that, he probably could have had tapes of it. I can only imagine he might have been taping, but that never came forward. But secondly, if you actually heard that and you are the ham radio operator, there's no reason in the world not to state your name. And so, as a journalist myself by training, I'm extremely suspicious of sources where there's only one source and it's unnamed. Now, as a dramatist, which is what I do with most of my life, I don't have a problem with it at all. That's certainly a great storyline, and I could write a great movie about it, but it doesn't seem to hold up. And more than that, I found another quote. I said it's the source, but it's also been denied by Neil Armstrong. He said, when asked about it, he said, "Your reliable sources are unreliable. There were no objects reported, found, or seen on Apollo 11 or any other Apollo flight other than of natural origin. All observations on all Apollo flights were fully reported to the public." Now, I know if you have a true conspiratorial mindset, and who among us really doesn't, it's easy to say, well, of course he would say that. Why wouldn't he say that? He has to deny it. They've given him the gag order, et cetera, et cetera. But, to look at Neil Armstrong and to hear the man talk as we have over the years is to see a guy who it's unlikely he would be part of that. And even if he was, it would have involved all kinds of people also being part of it. And I'm not saying that's not possible, but Neil Armstrong and certain other astronauts have all taken the position that had they seen anything, they'd have, of course, wanted to talk about it. I don't know if that's true or not, and it's also true that Buzz Aldrin has dipped his toe in the water sort of up to talking about those kind of things, and there have been other astronauts. But on the story of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin on the moon, taking film or video and seeing ships, observing them and then taking off, that part doesn't seem to hold as much as it ought to. There were some instances where Aldrin talked about seeing things outside of the craft window that he made it sound or it has been made to sound like he was saying about UFOs, and then later he's denied it. Buzz has kind of been all over the map. You could look at that one of two ways. A, he's telling the truth, but then B, they got to him and told him to be quiet about it. Or you could look at it as the fact that, look, the man's written a number of science fiction things. I've met him on several occasions. He reputedly had some substance abuse problems in the past. He's a great guy to party with. I mean, I didn't drink with him or anything, but he's a hail fellow, well met. For as much as Neil Armstrong was shy, Buzz Aldrin was not shy. The writer of the sci-fi books, you could say possibly, I guess he wrote sci-fi because that was his coded way of getting out what he thought was the truth. I have no doubt that in his core, Buzz Aldrin, like many people, certainly most of the people who are watching this, believe that the universe has to have a lot of life out there. But that's different than having observed it personally. And I'm not entirely convinced that Buzz Aldrin has had that happen either. The things that he said that he observed could easily be explained by, some kind of debris. I think. I'm not an expert.
Right. He actually, I believe because that was the 2005 Science Channel interview where he came out saying that they saw these objects and they didn't report it back. And then when he backpedaled and said, no, it was taken out of context, that it was most likely he believes a panel from the upper stage coming off of the actual craft. But there was another incident where apparently James Fox in 1999 was supposed to have an interview with Buzz, and he let him wait for 4 days, and he had flown out his crew and everything. Right. And then he finally called James up and said, I can't do the interview anymore because, someone else in the light just came out, and everyone thinks they're crazy now, so I can't do it, and hung up. And didn't really release his UFO stories, but kind of hinted that maybe he had something to tell. But again, possibly that
he might have had something to tell. Did he shoot color film of UFOs in the Sea of Tranquility? I'd say that one's probably not likely. He probably did see something that he couldn't explain at the time. Mm-hmm. And but again, if primary sources won't come forward, you have a problem. At least in comparison, Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 pilot, has been very outspoken. Not that he's seen anything, but about his own opinions. He isn't being coy at all. I mean, with Armstrong and Aldrin in Apollo 11, you have with Armstrong a complete and total denial from a guy who seems pretty credible. With Aldrin, you have a vacillation back and forth from and again, I love Buzz Aldrin. I mean, childhood idol of mine, but in a court of law, people would eviscerate him right now. An attorney for the other side, because of his back and forth statements and because of the murkiness and of what he actually said, and whether or not he has anybody to back him up on it. There's nobody backing him up on that. His partner, the only other guy that was there, is saying it didn't happen.
Right.
So we are left in that maddening place that ufology always finds itself, with tantalizing hints, but not the real facts.
A lot of speculation.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I continually say to people, there's a lot of noise, but that doesn't mean there's not a signal. So I'm a guy that certainly believes that there's a reality to UFO ET reality that I think is pretty well demonstrated. But that certainly doesn't mean all the cases are true. Although, again, Armstrong and Aldrin taken aside, maybe tantalizing, but there are other astronauts like Edgar Mitchell that have been outspoken, and others, particularly Gordon Cooper, who was extremely outspoken over the years in both writing and and verbally, and in fact was unrepentant about telling a story in 1951 where he said he actually saw one on the ground. And I believe Scott Carpenter or Deke Slayton, maybe both, had encounters with UFOs while flying as pilots. And so again, it's if we're looking for NASA to come out and say, yeah, by the way, that's all true, you're not going to get that. And frankly, I think Cooper is dead, and whatever he's on the record with, he is. And Edgar Mitchell, who I find to be an incredibly credible person, has been marginalized by our own media. I mean, why? I can never understand why, when Edgar Mitchell says the things that he says, he's not someone who has been on the front cover of Time and Newsweek. That, by the way, is NASA calling me right now, saying, knock it off. But
don't say anything.
Yeah, so I'm not talking to NASA right now. We'll just you get what you get right now, and I'll shut up when they tell me. Okay. But,
So to your point there, that's interesting that you bring that up, because the show that just wrapped up, the Chasing UFOs show,
right,
they actually met with Edgar Mitchell, and I've learned from the people on the show that of the maybe minute and a half they showed of Edgar Mitchell on the show, they had a dialogue of more than an hour and a half with the guy, and he said some pretty incredible things. But
yes,
of course, they chose not to show that on the show. They showed a minute and a half of really nothing that important with this meeting.
Well, that says a lot more about Chasing UFOs as a television show than it does about Edgar Mitchell, because he's been like you well know, outspoken, clear, consistent, and I was very proud, by the way, that he endorsed AD after disclosure when Richard and Dolan and I asked him to. So I look at him as a leader, and certainly here's what I say about Edgar Mitchell when I talk to people. He's one of the bravest men that's ever lived, because if you think about it, he was the Apollo 14 pilot. Apollo, I'm just going to have to make that go away. Apollo, let me back up on that. I think he's the bravest man that ever lived in our lifetimes, because after Apollo 13 nearly blew up and the people who came back barely made it home alive, Edgar Mitchell was the next guy up. He's the next guy that had to get in a capsule and go to the moon. And the last guys almost didn't make it back, but he got in the capsule and flew out there, landed successfully, and came home. So for us to minimize what he said or how he said it or what he said always has struck me as odd. And he should have been a feature article on Time and Newsweek, and he should have been on 60 Minutes. And I don't know why that never happened. And the only explanation is that the pillars of secrecy, which are denial and ridicule, work so well that even a guy like him can't get a good hearing.
Yeah. You're right. People like Edgar Mitchell are, he specifically has not been shy at all about sharing his opinions, and that's great. And I like something that you pointed out recently, that with Neil Armstrong's passing, there was no, as far as we know, no deathbed confession, no secrets came out, and proponents of the UFO ET reality, we always hope for that when people who have been to space, astronauts and military personnel, we always hope that maybe something will come out on the deathbed, but as far as we know, nothing came out with Neil Armstrong.
It didn't with Neil, but my money would still be on Buzz Aldrin. I mean, I would put it this way for Buzz Aldrin too. I mean, I hope he lives many more years and in good health. But at some point, when he feels that it's appropriate, he should do one of two things. He should either say, I don't want to be coy anymore, and either all that stuff where I implied we might have seen something, that's not the way it was, and I was trying to sell books, if that's what really went down. Or he should say, I want to be very clear, I only put my toe in the water, this is what really happened, and completely come clean. Because right now, Buzz is kind of in that netherworld. And the thing is, even if he made a startling deathbed confession, what would happen? People would say, well, he was an unreliable witness. He had a drinking problem. He, all the things that he was a sci-fi author. I mean,
crazy old man.
Yeah, crazy old coot Buzz Aldrin. And I don't think that would be wise to do, but that could easily happen.
Right. Well, we can keep our fingers crossed for when the time comes that maybe we'll get a little clarity in that respect.
This, by the way, is one of the reasons why I should be in a studio instead of in my home office. I'm going to let this ring for another minute and roll for another ring or two and roll to something else. So we'll
talk about conspiracies. I actually think that you set this whole thing up. You want to pretend like you're a really busy guy.
That's true. Exactly. My wife is in the other room calling me. And that's great. And in a minute, my kids are calling, so it'll be great. Yeah.
Well, Bryce, I know you've got a lot to do, so we'll wrap this up. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I know that space is something that interests you a lot, and I know you spent a lot of time in your career as a space correspondent, and that's pretty cool. So,
one thing I would just put out there is, we want to stretch it all the way to make the big connection, of the astronauts and ufology. Maybe that's happened, maybe it hasn't happened, but just the mere space that we have had happen in our history. It's amazing. I've seen the space shuttle land several times. I saw it launch several times. It's an astonishing human piece of engineering, and makes you proud to see it, regardless of whether it was the right thing to build or not, or whatever people want to say about it. And the actual accomplishment in 1969 of actually getting a craft to the moon with that technology and landing a couple of guys there for 3 hours and letting them walk around, and it's just such a tremendous accomplishment. And if anything, it should inspire us for the future to think about, we can do these things. We can set a goal, and maybe we should split off ufology from that and just say, what, maybe they'll later in AD, after disclosure, we'll learn that there were NASA cover-ups of one kind or another. But until then, let's go to Mars.
Yeah.
If there are spacecraft that are already going to Mars, I can't tell you. Some people think that's the case. But if there aren't, then let's get a real one together and let's go there now. That's what Neil Armstrong would have wanted to do. I saw him on 60 Minutes. I'll leave you with this thought. They said, they're still having they're talking about going to Mars. Would you go? And he was 75 at the time. He said, well, I don't know that they'd want me, but I'm definitely available. That's how I want to remember Neil.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
Thank
Bryce.
you. All right.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Take care, Bryce.
Bye.
So on this show, we like to highlight a few events we think you might be interested in. Here's one that everyone can participate in. September 22nd is International Observe the Moon Night. Events will be taking place all over the world, but you can also organize your own event in your area. So to get materials to start your own event, visit observethemoonnight.org. The National Atomic Testing Museum, in association with the Smithsonian Institution, presents a special lecture entitled Military UFOs, Secrets Revealed on September 22nd. The event will host an impressive list of speakers, including Colonel John Alexander, Colonel Charles Halt, Colonel Robert Friend, Colonel Bill Coleman, and Nick Pope. You can visit the National Atomic Testing Museum's website for more info. The MUFON Pennsylvania East Coast Conference will be at the Sheraton Bucks County Hotel in Langhorne, PA, September 28th through the 30th, featuring speakers, field investigator training, cocktail parties, and more. Visit MUFONPA.com for more info.
That's all for this episode of Spacing Out. Be sure to visit openminds.tv for all the latest news. Join us again next week when we'll talk about Los Angeles UFO sightings with Steve Murillo, the State Section Director of MUFON LA.
And remember, if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like it on YouTube and leave us your comments. And if any of you will be attending the upcoming Military UFOs Secrets Revealed lecture at the National Atomic Testing Museum in Las Vegas, come say hello. Jason and I will be there, and we'd love to meet you. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maureen Ellsbury.
And I'm Jason McClellan. We will see you in the future.